The fire didn't end it. It only exposed what had been hidden for generations. Now the players are awake. Adaora, armed with truth. Jide caught between legacy and love. And Ifeoma, if you think she's done, you don't know how deep blood runs in the Owolabi name. The curse may be dying, but what rises next is more dangerous than any spirit. Because when secrets fall and power shifts, only the bold survive. This is part 2. And every choice now echoes forever.
Across Lagos, in a sleek penthouse in Ikoyi, Jide Owolabi stood, alone, staring through a floor-to-ceiling window at the city's glittering lights. Luxury surrounded him. Marble floors, leather furniture, priceless art. But inside, he felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. His phone lit up on the table behind him, a message from Amara Eze. Dinner tomorrow, 8 p.m., family insists, dress appropriately. Jide's grip tightened around the phone. His knuckles turned white. Control. Something he'd spent years perfecting was slipping. And it all started the moment she walked out of that pawn shop. "You okay?" a voice called out. He turned. Ifeoma, his cousin, uninvited as usual. Her heels clicked across the marble like a countdown. Her red dress shimmered like danger. "I'm fine," Jide muttered, cold. Ifeoma crossed her arms, smirking. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jide." "I don't know what you mean," he said, facing the city again. She laughed, low, sharp, mocking. "Oh, please. You think the family doesn't see it? That girl, Adaora. You're not hiding anything." "You're risking everything. Our name, our legacy, our future." Jide clenched his jaw, saying nothing. "You have a job to do," she pressed. "Marry Amara. Secure the business. Forget the pawn shop. Forget her." "This isn't university romance, Jide. You don't get to fall in love. You follow orders." He turned sharply, his eyes cold fire. "If you touch her, Ifeoma, you'll regret it." But her smirk only deepened. "Big words, cousin. You couldn't even protect yourself 7 years ago." With that, she walked out, heels echoing like gunshots. Jide stood there, alone again, the city stretching out beneath him like a trap. His heart pounded, guilt pressed into his ribs. 7 years ago, he'd lost everything. Now, he'd clawed back power, wealth, position. But for what? He sank into a chair, buried his face in his hands. And then, he saw her face again, Adaora. Her pain, her anger, her courage. Not a pawn, not a plan, a person. He picked up his phone. Amara's message still blinked, but in Jide's chest, something had shifted. He didn't know if Adaora would ever forgive him, but he knew one thing. The pact they made wasn't just paper anymore. It was a promise, and this time, he wouldn't break it. The night was warm and sticky as Adaora stood outside the tall iron gates of Owolabi Holdings estate in Ikoyi. She wore black jeans and a fitted blouse, simple, sharp, enough to blend in without drawing eyes. Her backpack was light, but the weight of its contents pressed heavy against her spine. A small recorder tucked into a hidden pocket, and the bottle of salt water, blessed by her grandmother years ago. Kelechi's voice echoed in her memory. "Get Jide's confession. Record it. Use it to break the curse." Her heart pounded,
but she pushed the fear down. She'd come too far to turn back now. The estate was crawling with security, big men in dark uniforms, faces hard, movements sharp. Adaora watched from the shadows, timing their routes like a game of chess. When the opening came, she moved, quick, silent. She slipped through the gate like smoke, her sneakers making no sound on the gravel. Ahead, the main house glowed with golden light, laughter and music spilling out into the warm night air. The grand hall pulsed with life. Music, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, perfume mixed with grilled meat, and the chatter of Lagos elite buzzed like flies around power. Adaora stayed to the edges, a ghost in the corner of the room, eyes sharp, searching. At the center of it all, Amara Eze sparkled in a gold gown, a smile frozen across her flawless face as guests surrounded her with praise. Adora's stomach twisted. She didn't care about Amara, but the celebration stung, a reminder of every lie Jide had told. Jide stood by the bar, a glass in his hand, a suit tailored to perfection, but his shoulders tense, his face distant. He looked like a man carrying a weight no one else could see. Adaora moved through the crowd, her heart pounding like a war drum. Jide spotted her before she reached him. His eyes widened for a second, then narrowed. His mask slid back into place. She leaned against the bar beside him, cool as glass. "Miss me?" she asked, voice light but sharp. His jaw tightened. He glanced around. Too many eyes. "What are you doing here?" he muttered. "I need to talk," she said, firm, unshaken. "Not here," Jide replied, voice low and cold. He set down his drink, gave the crowd one last glance, then nodded toward a side door. "Follow me." And without another word, Adaora followed him, into the lion's den, into whatever truth waited on the other side of that door. Because tonight, she wasn't just a girl with a plan. She was the storm. The music faded behind them as Jide led her down a quiet corridor, each step echoing like a heartbeat. They slipped into a study, the door clicking shut with finality. A single lamp cast shadows across the room, books lining the walls, air thick with the smell of old paper and secrets. "You shouldn't be here," Jide snapped, his voice sharp. "This is dangerous." "I didn't have a choice," Adaora shot back, stepping closer. "You owe me the truth. No more games." Jide let out a bitter laugh, not amused, just tired. "I don't owe you anything, Adaora. We had a deal, that's it." Her chest clenched, but she didn't back down. "Was it just a deal?" she asked, voice quieter now. "Or was there something real? Tell me." Jide stared at her, silent. Then finally, "I didn't expect you," he said. "You were supposed to be a contract, a way out, nothing more." A pause, a breath. "But you weren't nothing. You were real, the first real thing I felt in years." Her fingers brushed the recorder in her pocket, hidden, recording. "What about the pawn shop?" she asked. "The curse. Tell me the truth." Jide closed his eyes, his voice breaking at the edges. "My grandfather made a deal with a spirit, an Ogbanje. It gave us wealth, but in return, we owe every generation. A child, a marriage, a sacrifice to keep the power alive." He swallowed hard. "I was supposed to bind you to it, not care about you." "So I was just a tool," she whispered. "That's all I was." Jide opened his eyes, met hers. "No." "I tried to fight it, but the curse, it's stronger than me." Adora's fists clenched, her breath caught, tears threatened. but she blinked them away. "You don't get to give up," she said. "I'm breaking this curse. For me, for my child. I'm ending it." "You'll die trying," Jide warned, fear in his voice. "Watch me." She turned and walked out. No hesitation, no fear, just purpose. The recorder pressed firm in her hand, his confession captured, her first real weapon. Outside, the wind howled as clouds gathered over Lagos. The storm was coming, but Adaora wasn't running anymore. She was the storm. Back in the study, Jide stood alone. The door had barely stopped swinging before he dropped into a chair, his hands trembling. He rubbed his face, like he could scrub away what just happened. He'd told Adaora the truth, more than he'd ever meant to. And now her eyes, fierce, wounded, unflinching, burned in his memory. She wasn't just a deal anymore. She never had been. "You messed up, didn't you?" The voice came like a knife wrapped in silk. Jide looked up. Ifeoma stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smirk razor sharp. She'd been watching, always watching. "Leave it alone," Jide said, voice low and tired. But she stepped inside anyway, heels clicking like a countdown. "You told her, didn't you? About the curse?" She shook her head, laughing without warmth. "You're such a fool, Jide." He stood, face hardening. "I said, leave it." "You think you can save her?" Ifeoma asked, voice dripping with venom. "The family won't let her walk away. And you're still promised to Amara." His fists clenched. "I'm done playing by their rules." Her smile vanished, eyes narrowed like a dagger unsheathed. "Careful, cousin. You're not as strong as you think. And that girl?" A pause. "She's already in too deep." She turned and walked away, her perfume lingering like a curse. The echo of her heels faded into the music still spilling down the hall. Celebration on the surface, decay beneath. Jide stood there, a storm behind his ribs. He'd followed orders for years, a puppet in a dynasty built on blood and silence. But now, Adaora had drawn a line in the dust, and he was ready to step across it. He didn't know if he could protect her, didn't know if he could break the curse, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let his family win, not this time. The war had begun, and he was choosing his side. The morning sky over Lagos hung thick with gray clouds, the kind that didn't just promise rain, but reckoning. Inside a quiet apartment in Lekki, Adaora sat cross-legged on the floor, the worn coffee table between her and Kelechi. The recorder lay silent, but its silence was heavy. Jide's voice lived inside it now. The curse, the pact, the family lies. It was all there. Proof, ammunition, the spark to burn an empire. "You got everything." Kelechi's voice was low. Adaora nodded, her hands slick with sweat. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. "His confession, the curse, the pact?" She looked at the recorder. "It's all there." Kelechi let out a slow breath, sitting back against the couch like a soldier resting before war. "Good. That's the first step." "Now we go for the real fight." Adaora swallowed hard. This wasn't just about a contract anymore, not even about Jide. This was bigger. It was about every child stolen by the pact, every mother silenced, every soul tied to a name they never chose. It was about her future, her freedom. The curse had to end. "What's the plan?" she asked. Kelechi leaned forward, his tone solid like iron. "Tonight, we hit Emerald Pawn Shop. The ledger's there, the first one, the one that started it all. We get it, we burn it,
and we end this." Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, with resolve. Adaora nodded, once, firmly. "Let's do it." Across the city, beneath the marble and gold of the Owolabi estate, Jide stood in a dark room, his shadow dancing against the wall of a shrine that had devoured generations. Candles flickered. Symbols marked the floor in chalk and ash. The air smelled of old blood and promises broken long ago. Behind him stood the architects of his cage, his mother, his grandfather, the elders, silent, watching. "You know what you must do," his grandfather rasped. "Marry Amara. Renew the family's fortune." Jide stared at the altar, its carvings blackened by time and sacrifice. His hands clenched at his sides. In his mind, he saw Adaora, fierce, proud, free. Was this all he was ever meant to be? A link in a cursed chain? "You're hesitating," his mother snapped, stepping forward, her voice like a blade. "Weakness will ruin us all, Jide." He closed his eyes. The walls seemed to breathe. His pulse roared in his ears. And then, he heard her voice again, clear as thunder in his memory. "Watch me." He opened his eyes. Steady now. "I'm not weak," he said softly, but the words struck like a war drum. "Not anymore." A crack ran through the air, not literal, but something shifted. His mother stiffened. The elders stirred. Before they could speak, Jide turned. He walked out of the shrine, out of the silence, out of the grip they'd held him in for years. He didn't know what he'd do next, but he knew one thing. He couldn't live like this. Not anymore. Rain hammered Lagos. Flooded streets, shattered winds, a city drowned in noise. But in the shadow of it all, two figures moved like phantoms through the downpour, hoods up, eyes sharp. Adaora and Kelechi. "You ready?" Kelechi's voice was barely more than a breath. Adora's eyes burned. "I'm not the scared girl who ran in here weeks ago. Let's end this." The door opened with a whisper of blood magic, broken by a flick of Kelechi's blue fire. Inside, the shop breathed. Dark, watching, alive. Then, "I knew you'd come," said Ifeoma, stepping from the dark, a black robe flowing like smoke around her, eyes gleaming with ancient hate. "You're here to die." Figures emerged, cursed souls with blank eyes shuffling like puppets. Kelechi moved fast. Steel met shadow. Adaora dove past them toward the counter, searching, desperate, breathing hard. Books, scrolls, trash, nothing, until the ledger. Cracked leather, binding stitched with old curses. "Found it!" But Ifeoma was already behind her. "You think you can destroy centuries of power? You're just a broken witch. Maybe, but I'm still fighting." A chair crashed, a scream, Kelechi bleeding. They piled the ledger and cursed contracts. A match lit with a prayer, and Lagos burned. The fire wasn't natural. It roared like a spirit finding its voice, tearing through wood and blood, through paper and time. Cursed souls collapsed, fading into mist. The walls screamed, the shop cracked, and Ifeoma shrieked, her voice shattering like glass. "You're dooming yourselves too. If freedom means burning, I'll burn." They crashed into the street, soaked in storm, choking on smoke. Behind them, Emerald pawn shop fell, wood to ash, curses to silence. "Think it's over." Kelechi's voice was hoarse. Adaora looked at the flames, her breath steady, her soul scarred, but hers again. "I hope so." Rain poured like judgment from the sky. The candles had flickered out, the chalk symbols smeared, melting into the earth like forgotten lies. And Jide knelt there, soaked and trembling, his head bowed before the ancestral shrine, the same place he had once surrendered everything. Then it happened. A pain, sharp, snapping, like a rope snapping inside his ribs, a tether breaking. He gasped, slamming to the wet earth, his palms hitting mud and ash. And then silence. Not outside, inside. That low, ever-present hum of the curse, the pressure, the dread, the invisible leash. It was gone. He lifted his head slowly, rain carving trails down his face. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't trapped. He was free. And in the center of that freedom, her name rose on his lips like a prayer. Adaora. A breath, a whisper, a vow. A small smile broke through his exhaustion, not one of triumph, but of recognition. She'd done it. She'd fought for her soul, and somehow she'd freed his too. His family stood frozen, staring. His mother's lips trembled. His grandfather looked shaken for the first time in decades. "The pact," someone whispered. "It's broken." Jide stood, taller than he ever had, soaked, bruised, whole. "I'm not yours anymore," he said. He turned from the shrine, leaving them behind. The storm still raged, but Jide Owolabi walked into it a man no longer owned. The rain had stopped, but Lagos hadn't exhaled. The streets were wet with leftover heat and smoke, as if the city itself had just come out of a fever dream. In a small kitchen in Lekki, Adaora sat on the floor, legs folded, back against the wall, a chipped mug of cold tea in her lap. Kelechi sat across from her, knees pulled to his chest, dark circles under his eyes, but a calmness in his breath. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was the sound of survival. "The curse is broken," Kelechi said softly. Adaora didn't answer. She just stared at the recorder on the coffee table, still silent, but full of Jide's confession. She should have felt free, but her chest still ached in that deep, twisting place only betrayal can reach. "You need to finish this," Kelechi said, his voice low. "Finish what?" Her tone was tired, not angry, not bitter, just hollow. "You broke the spirit's hold," he replied, "but you're still holding on to something else. Someone else." Jide. That name still lived inside her like an ember, not burning, just not gone. She shut her eyes, saw his face in the pawn shop. He looked like regret had a body, like he wanted to protect her but didn't know how. "I don't know if I can face him," she said. Kelechi gave a slow nod, not judging, just seeing her. "You faced the Ogbanje, Adaora. You walked into cursed ground and set it on fire. Jide Owolabi is not your biggest demon." Adaora let out something like a laugh, but it came out sharp, bitter. "You don't know him," she shook her head. "He's not just a liar. He's everything I wanted to believe could be real, even when I knew better." Kelechi stood, pulled on his jacket. He didn't push, didn't preach. He just said, "You're not the girl who runs anymore." At the door he paused. "Figure it out," he said, voice softer. "You deserve to be free. All the way free." Then he was gone. Adaora stayed on the floor a moment longer, listening to the hum of traffic through her window. Then slowly she stood. Her body ached, but something in her spine straightened. She didn't know what she'd say to Jide, didn't know what she needed from him. Apology, closure, maybe nothing. But she knew this. She couldn't move forward while looking back, and she was tired of carrying ghosts. Across Lagos, in a high-rise penthouse overlooking the water, Jide Owolabi stood barefoot on his balcony. The sunrise cut through the clouds like a slow fire, burning the shadows off the night.
He hadn't slept, not a second. The moment the curse broke, he'd felt it, like a rope snapping deep inside his chest. For the first time, he could breathe without someone else's hand on his throat. And he knew why. Adaora. He gripped the balcony railing, knuckles white. She'd fought for her freedom, and somehow she'd given him his too. Even after everything, the contract, the lies, the way he'd tried to make her a tool in a legacy she never asked for. Jide had spent his life mastering control. Now, all he wanted to do was tell the truth, even if it was too late. He grabbed his car keys. No suit, no mask, just jeans, a plain shirt, and a storm in his chest. The streets of Lagos were already alive, hawkers shouting, buses honking, like it was any other day. But for Jide, everything had changed. He drove through the city practicing the words. The right ones never came. Only one stayed. Sorry. When he pulled up outside her building in Lekki, she was already there, arms folded, back straight, eyes sharp, like she'd known he'd come. Adaora. Not the girl from the pawn shop, not the woman he tried to own, the one who survived him. Jide stepped out of the car. The air between them buzzed with tension, but no spirits, no blood magic, just truth. He took a breath and stepped forward. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. For everything. Adaora didn't move. You lied to me, she said quietly. You used me. You made me feel like I was nothing. Jide nodded, eyes stinging. I know, and I'll hate myself for it forever. She looked away, just for a moment, and when she turned back, her voice had shifted. You also fought for me. You told me the truth when it mattered. That counts for something. His throat tightened. Hope flickered. I don't deserve you forgiving me, he said. But if you give me a chance, I'll spend every day trying to make it right. A pause. She stepped closer. One condition. Jide's breath caught. Anything. Adaora looked him in the eyes, steady, unshaken. No more pacts, no more contracts, no more secrets. If we do this, she said, we do it as equals. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. Equals, he said. I promise. Adaora didn't smile, but the weight in her chest shifted. Not gone, just lighter. They stood there, close but not touching, the city waking around them. And as the sun broke higher over Lagos, Adaora felt something stir in the air. Not magic, not fear, but something rarer. Hope. Maybe even the start of something real. Later that morning, Adaora sat on her couch, legs tucked under her, a cup of tea warming her palms. The apartment was quiet. Not tense, not haunted. Just quiet. Jide had left an hour ago. No final kiss, no promises. Just a look and a quiet, I'll call later. And it was enough. The room felt different now. Less like a cage, more like a choice. She thought about everything. The pawn shop, the cursed contract, the girl she'd been, broke, desperate, half believing in magic, fully drowning in fear. And the woman she was now, scarred, yes, but still standing, still hers. Her phone buzzed. Kelechi, you okay? She smiled, small and real, fingers tapping back. Yeah, getting there. A second later, told you you're stronger than you think. Her smile lingered. She wasn't the same woman who walked into Emerald Pawn with nothing but a trembling voice and a broken name. She'd faced demons, bled, burned it all down. She had scars, but they were hers.
And maybe, just maybe, so was this beginning. Lagos moved like it always did, loud, chaotic, alive. But Jide drove through it with new eyes. No suit, no lies, no family script whispering in his ear. Just the road. And a memory of her. Adaora. Her fire, her fury, her voice when she said, "Equals." He didn't know where they were going, didn't pretend to have the answers, but for the first time in years, his hands were steady on the wheel. His choices, his own. And he knew one thing, he'd fight. For her, for himself, for what they could build, whatever that became. The clouds had broken. The sun spilled onto Lagos, hot and golden, like it too had survived the night. Adaora sipped her tea. Jide turned left at a market stall where kids played in the puddles. No curses, no chains, just breath, just mourning. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for once, that was enough. 3 months had passed since the pawn shop turned to ash, since curses burned away and old chains finally broke. Lagos hadn't changed. Still loud, still wild, still pulsing with life. But Adaora and Jide, they were building something new. Far from the towers of Ikoyi, they'd moved into a quiet house in Lekki Phase 1. No servants, no family expectations, just them. Adaora had opened a shop, Ada's Haven, just off Admiralty Road, shelves lined with herbal teas, handmade charms, and dusty old books she'd rescued from street vendors. No dark magic, no tricks, just healing, just home. Neighbors came for tea, old women whispered stories, children stared wide-eyed at the bottles with pressed leaves and names like Peace Root and Fire Within. Adaora smiled, because she finally had something that belonged to her. Jide had walked away, from Owalabi Holdings, from boardrooms soaked in blood deals, from his family's empire built on rot. He started small, a consulting firm. No elevator views, just a second-floor office above a tailor's shop. Young dreamers came, full of ideas and fear, and Jide showed them the path Lagos never made easy. He worked with his sleeves rolled up, his suits traded for linen shirts and honesty. It wasn't flashy, but it was his. The ghosts hadn't vanished, not completely. Some nights Jide woke, gasping, the faces of the cursed blinking through his dreams. Some nights Adaora stared out her window long after closing time, wondering if something ancient still watched from the shadows, but they had each other, and that made the darkness quieter. Their love wasn't easy. It was fought for, tested, broken, rebuilt, and real. One Saturday, Adaora stood in the kitchen, wrestling with a stubborn pot of egusi soup. It smelled right, onions, pepper, palm oil, but the texture was wrong, and she muttered curses under her breath. Jide strolled in, stole a piece of plantain from the tray, grinned. "You're gonna burn it," he teased, chewing like it was a victory. Adaora glared. "I'm a warrior, not a chef." He pulled her close, wrapping arms around her waist, his voice soft against her ear. "You're both, and more." Her head rested against his chest. The frustration faded. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wonder what would have happened if we never made that pact." Jide touched her chin, tilting her face to his. "I think we'd have found each other anyway. Some people are just meant to be." She studied him. No magic, no lies, just him. "You really believe that?" He nodded. "Every word. You're stuck with me, Adaora." She laughed, smacked his arm lightly. "Lucky me." They stood there, egusi bubbling behind them, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels like peace. No curses, no contracts, just love. a love chosen, and still choosing. Later that evening, Adaora and Jide curled up on the couch, half watching a Nollywood thriller on TV. The room was wrapped in calm, a soft lamp glowing amber, a bowl of popcorn between them, and a blanket tangled around Adora's legs. Jide's arm rested across her shoulders, fingers tracing gentle patterns in a rhythm that had nothing to prove. The movie was loud, some over-the-top villains shouting revenge, but their laughter made more noise. "This guy's shouting like he's auditioning for a play," Jide joked, shaking his head. Adaora grinned, tossing a popcorn kernel at him. "You could do better?" "Way better," he said, catching it in his mouth. "I'd win an Oscar." Before she could clap back, a small voice called from the hallway.
"Mommy? Daddy?"
They turned, instantly alert, instantly soft. Zara stood there in her pink pajamas, tiny fists rubbing her sleepy eyes, curly hair puffed like a storm cloud. Adaora sat up, arms open.
"Zara, what's wrong?" "I had a bad dream,"
the 5-year-old whispered.
"There was a shadow. It was chasing me."
Adora's heart clenched, but her voice stayed calm. She reached for her daughter.
"Come here, my cloud."
Zara padded across the room, climbed into the nest between them. Jide tugged the blanket over all three, wrapping her in warmth. "What was the shadow like?" he asked, brushing a curl from her cheek.
"Big,"
Zara murmured.
"and scary." "No shadows here, baby,"
Adaora said softly.
"Just us. You're safe."
Jide nodded, eyes steady. "Your mum's right. We've got you. Always." Zara blinked up at them.
"Promise?"
Together, like they'd rehearsed it in their hearts, they said, "Promise." Rain tapped lightly on the windows, like a lullaby with no words. Zara's breathing slowed, her tiny form pressed between them, safe in the arms of people who had fought hell itself to make this moment possible. Adaora looked at Jide, her voice barely a whisper. "She's perfect, isn't she?" He looked down at both of them. "Like her mum," he said, with that same small smile he'd once tried to hide behind suits and silence. Adaora rolled her eyes, but leaned into him. They didn't speak again. Didn't need to. Outside, Lagos roared and raged, but inside the house was warm. The storm was behind them, and for the first time in a long time, there were no shadows here. The night stretched deep over Lagos, a city that never truly slept. Cars still honked in the distance, music thumped somewhere down the street. The rain tapped steadily on the windows, soft and rhythmic. But inside their home, Adaora sat still, wrapped in quiet, wrapped in thought. She wasn't the same girl who'd walked into Emerald Pawn Shop with desperation in her chest and a bottle of blessed salt water in her bag. She hadn't escaped that day. She'd survived. She'd fought. She'd become. The memories came slow, the fear, the cursed souls, the weight of legacy pressing down on her lungs. And then, Jide. Not the man from the contract, not the lie in a suit, but the one who stayed, the one who bled, the one who chose her back, again and again. She glanced at Zara, curled up on a cushion nearby, sleeping soundly, her little chest rising and falling like the world hadn't tried to break her parents. Then across the room, Jide met her gaze, his eyes soft, his smile quiet. "What?" she asked, raising a brow. He shrugged, voice low. "Just thinking." Pause, a breath. "We're pretty lucky, aren't we?" Adaora's heart swelled, emotion rising like tidewater. She nodded. Yeah, we are.
No more pacts. No more blood-stained legacies.
No more secrets whispered in candlelight. Just life, in all its mess and beauty. Just love, earned, raw, and real. Outside the storm thickened, as Lagos always does, but inside peace curled in the corners of the room, settling in their bones. Adaora leaned back into Jide's embrace, her eyes fluttering closed. Tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, it never was, but it was theirs to meet, together, as equals, as fire and flesh, as a family. And whatever came next, they were ready. Some stories end not with a final battle, but with a quiet choice. To love, to rebuild, to live. Adaora and Jide were never perfect, but they chose each other again and again, through betrayal, through fire, through fear. And somehow that choice became their greatest magic. Thank you for walking this path with them, for believing in strength that doesn't roar, in love that doesn't beg, and in healing that takes its time. If this story moved you, share it, remember it, and never forget the most powerful curse to break is the one you place on your own heart. What would you have done if you were Adaora? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where the supernatural meets the soul.